Welcome to Web Platform Feature of the Week. So, as you can notice maybe already, I'm introducing something a little new to these episodes, I guess episodes is a good name, part of the newsletter, in which I want to kind of highlight a organization, a person, a project, or something that I feel is doing a heck of a lot for the open web and the web platform. And I just like to say thank you and also highlight them in case you don't know about them. So this week, I want to introduce you to the amazing folks over at Open Web Docs. And so while they have a bigger incentive of taking care of of documentation for the web as a whole or holistically, for the longest time and still now, their primary focus is still MDN Web Docs. So there's a lot of great people doing great work at Mozilla. I used to be part of that team, but and they still are doing great work, but Open Web Docs also does an enormous amount of work. So if you appreciate the quality of the content on MDN Web Docs and you want to see this continue and improve, then I highly recommend checking out Open Web Docs and supporting them in any way that you can. So if you want to read more about what they do and stuff like that, of course, have a look at their website, openwebdocs.org. You can also read their impact reports where they go into more details about all the stuff that they have done. And there's ways to get involved. You can see their sponsors. And if you're able to, you can also donate. So those are the people I wanted to feature this week. And with that, let's get into the topic of this week. So the topic this week is local and session storage. So we're looking at storage in the browser. And there's other ways too. There's cookies. There's also IndexedDB. But for this one, we're going to look at these two specifically. They're very simple to use, but they can be very effective. So I think we can start by talking about what they are and what's different between the two. So session storage and local storage are both scoped to the current domain. So that means that if you store something on example.com and you then go on to foo.com, then you won't be able to access the stuff from example.com. So it's scoped to the current domain. So that's great for security, of course. But then with session storage, it's also scoped to the current top level browsing context. That is a fancy way of saying to the current tab, or if you're opening it in its own window, then this window, which means as soon as you close the tab or the window or the browser, anything you've stored in session storage is cleared. So that is something to be aware of. Then local storage persists between sessions. So that'll persist even if the user closes the browser and then comes back. Of course, it's only in the current browser. So if you store something in Zen, for example, and then you go to Google Chrome or some other browser, it won't be there, right? It's specific to the current browser you're using. Of course, it'll persist between browser updates and stuff like that, but not across different browsers. You'll have to persist the same storage in each browser. So that's also an important nuance to be aware of. Then users can also clear local storage, just like they can clear cookies and that kind of thing. So be aware of that. So don't just assume that your storage exists. Always write your code in a way that you're first checking for its presence. And if you cannot lose information, then be sure that you have a way of persisting this to permanent storage that's not on the user's machine, maybe in a database, in the cloud somewhere, or on your own servers. So for the demo, I wanted to do something really simple. And then, as often happens, I ended up doing something more complicated. So we'll only zero in on the pieces of code that's really relevant to what I'm talking to now, so this video doesn't get too long. But of course, this will also be on GitHub and you can play around with it. So what I ended up doing is, here's the page. So I'm using OpenTrivia. So it is the OpenTrivia database. I'm using that for my session storage part of this. And basically what I'm doing is I'm loading these categories using an API call, and then I'm storing those categories in session storage. So the next time you reload the page, You don't close the tab and open it in a new tab or something like that. But if you just reload the page, these categories will be available immediately. And I'll show you in a second, because it's not making that HTTP request to the external server. It's actually just loading it from local storage, or from session storage, I should say. And then I'll show you in a second, when I refresh the page, I'm showing a banner over at the top that says like new categories added. For that one, I'm using local storage. And the reason for that is it has a dismiss button. And when you dismiss that, I want to store that you have seen and dismissed this banner. So I don't want to show it again. If you open a new tab, or if you close the browser and you come back or anything like that, I don't want to show you the banner again, because this is information that's no longer relevant to you. I will dig in a little more into how you could expand on that idea. But for now, I just wanted to keep it really simple and focus on the code and what you can do. So let me quickly jump over here and just make sure, yeah, everything is still running. So I'm going to refresh this again. And notice how long it took for these these categories on the left-hand side to load, right? And now you can also see there's a banner on top. Now, if I open my DevTools here, this is now Zen/Firefox. You will find in Chrome, I believe everything sits under the application tab. But so storage, and then here we have local storage and session storage. And because it's scoped to the domain, we will have to look at this localhost 5500 for local and session. So right now you can see here's OpenTrivia. And if I move this over here, you can see here's all the objects that I'm persisting in session storage, right? So if I now take this one and I open a new tab and I press enter, you'll see again, they take quite a while to load, because it's making that fetch request and doing all the things, and only then it can show them. But if I refresh the page here in our existing session where we have session storage, have a look at those categories. It didn't even flinch. It's just there immediately. Now, the other thing is, of course, wherever we've gone so far, our banner is still there. But now, if we close our banner, let me just open the DevTools again, and let's have a look at local storage. So right now it's empty, but let's close this banner. And here we can see alert banner, and we have our disabled banners, and we have an ID in here. So now if I refresh, the banner doesn't show up. And if we go into a new tab, it still doesn't show up, because local storage is persisting between sessions and between our top-level browsing context, i.e. in between different tabs. Also, if I should go File, New Window, and I open it up in here, our banner still doesn't show. Now, something to be wary of, and I mentioned this in the newsletter as well, if somebody opens your app or your website in private browsing, then your local storage will only persist until the last private browsing tab is closed. The reason I say it like that is because some browsers will, in the same window, mix private browsing context and non-private browsing context. Usually one is used to having to open a new private browsing window, and in there you'll have all your tabs, and in the separate window you'll have all your non-private browsing ones. But some browsers mix them up. So just be wary that maybe in some browsers you'll still be in the same window, but you would have closed all the private browsing tabs in that window. And at that point, your local storage will also be cleared out, just like a session storage. So what is the code behind this? So let's have a look at that. I implemented these as 2 custom elements, but that is not super important. It's just the way I like to write JavaScript these days. I don't know. It just feels really nice. And so I just kept going with that. Let's have a look at the alert banner first, because in this case, it's the simplest one of the 2, although they're very, very similar. So basically what I start off doing is I call show banners. So the very first thing I do is I just get all the banners. If there's no banners, I just return. Then we do this thing. We get dismissed banners. And here is the thing. So we're saying local storage, get item, and we're passing in the storage key. So this is a string which you can see I stored up here called alert banner. So this is a string that the browser can then associate this storage object with this key. So when you then tell the browser, hey, get the storage object that has this key, then it can look it up and give you the appropriate piece of storage, because you can have multiple things stored, right? You don't have to just store things by one key and everything needs to just live under the same key. So if there was nothing, then I just return null. If we do have something, here's the thing. You can only store strings. The key is a string, the value is a string. Nothing else can be stored in both local and session storage. But because of JSON, so JSON.stringify and JSON.parse, we can take an object and stringify it, store that in local storage or session storage, and then when we get it back, we throw it into JSON.parse and we get our object back. Now, this is one of the reasons why I do this in a try-catch, because if anything is funky with our JSON, it's going to throw a parse error. And so we want to be able to handle that. Also, sometimes just by interacting with our local storage, maybe something can be wrong, because you can also install extensions, by the way, that can block local storage. So just to be sure that we're not just breaking, but that we maybe in some progressive way handling failures, we're putting all of this stuff inside a try-catch. All right, but let's go with the happy path. So let's say we did get something in storage, and now we've parsed it. We have our object, and we are returning it. Now, as you saw before, this object would basically be have a key of dismissed banners and then an array of IDs. So if we then go back to blah, blah, blah. So we have our dismissed banners. So if we have our dismissed banner IDs, now we're just going to filter the banners that we got from our page, because again, here I only have one banner in here, but I could have more than one banner in there. But some of them might already have been dismissed. So we're filtering those out. And then of the banners that is left, we call show active banners, which is just some code that just sets hidden to false so that the banner will show. And then we add some event listeners. So what happens now is when you click that button to close the banner, then on the banner itself, we store this ID. And now this can come from multiple places. Maybe this is server-side rendered, and this is generated using like something like the crypto. So crypto dot, let me show you in the browser real quick. So there is this thing for, let's do clear. And then so there is crypto dot, well, get random values dot, there we go, random UUID. This is a really cool function that just returns this long, like, random string, right? So maybe you're using that on the server to get the ID. That's how I got this one, or some other way. But you have some way of identifying this banner by an ID that is unique, but will persist across sessions. And so, right, so we have a banner. We get the parent element, because remember our target element here will be our button. So you want to get our parent element, which is this div. So our structure is important here. And then we're going to get the ID attribute off of it. And if we have a banner ID, then instead of getting, we're going to set this item under alert banner. And we're going to JSON stringify disabled banners banner ID. Now, right now I'm working with only one banner. So I'm just kind of throwing that banner into the array. But what you would really want to do is you'd want to first get the values out, then push this new one into it, and then stringify it back. So let's say, for example, something like, let's take a look here. So something like const current state, something like that, local storage dot get item, and it'll be our, I didn't use, but it's this dot storage key, right? So again, we would say, let's just assume that we did get something, but you would, no, let me type it out. So if we have a current state, then we know this is now, so current state would be current state dot dismissed banners, right? Dot push. We would do something like that. Current state dot push, and then here we go, banner ID, right? So we're going to push that onto the existing array, and then instead of doing this over here, we will do current state, which is a little weird naming, but it is what it is. You'll use a better variable name, but, or I mean, maybe it's not so bad. It is the new current state that we're persisting. And of course, here we would rather want to do this dot storage key, just so that we don't accidentally use the wrong storage key when we're setting versus getting. So this way we know we're always using the same one. So we're not going to set it using a key that's maybe just misspelled and getting it from a different one. And now all of a sudden our storage is out of sync. So because you could have multiple banners, of course, you would do this kind of thing. Now, you can imagine how this can expand. So when I was on MDN and also now at Factorial, we're building this functionality that's very similar to this for a client, but it gets a little bit more complicated because you could get multiple banners, and each banner could have a start and end date. So maybe it's in the future, so you need to check that, and then you store basically a more complex object inside local storage. And every time the page loads, you will load that up and you will say, okay, cool, let me have a look at the banners that I have in here. Has anyone been dismissed? Those ones I don't want to show. Is there any one of these that has not been dismissed, but the start date is still in the future? And then also you can check for things where the end date has passed, and you can remove this from your object, right? So you can do a little bit of cleanup. So you can start thinking how you can build a pretty dang nice, like, kind of notification banner announcements kind of thingy, all client side, where you just get initial data from the backend, maybe because it's persisted there for a longer period of time. But then from there on, you can kind of manage everything on the client side, whether it's a single page app or even across navigations. You just don't have to do fetches to the backend again. So that's how you can expand on this idea. But so that's our local storage part. So let's go back and have a look at our OpenTrivia. So what OpenTrivia does is, first thing is we load our categories. And so the first thing we try to do is we try to see, do we have any cached categories? So we do by get categories from storage. So you can see the only difference here is we're saying session storage instead of local storage. But we're still doing the same deal. Get item, this.storage key. And again, here we're using OpenTrivia as our storage key. And where was I? So we're getting that. If we don't have anything, we return null. If we got it, we're parsing that storage object and we're returning our object. Again, in a try catch, so in case something goes wrong, either getting stuff from local storage or parsing our JSON. So with our categories, so we do one of two things. So first thing is we're going to try and do that, but we might get null back here, right? So then we're saying use that, but if it was null, then we're just fetching it from the server. And then what we're doing is, if everything was good and we were able to take our response and get the JSON from it, then we take that and we pass it to cache categories. And what this does, again, instead of local storage, it does sessionStorage.set item. It passes our storage key, and then here you can see JSON.stringify the object that we got in. So now it's taking that object, it's converting it into a string, and then storing it. And again, putting it in a try catch just because maybe something goes wrong with either the stringifying or setting something into storage. So we're not just failing hard. Maybe we can be a little bit more, what was the word I used? Graceful. We can handle it a little more gracefully. And then, of course, in this case, we've cached it now, but we are returning the live results we just got. And let me see what I was. And that's it. So If we did get something from storage, we're going to use it. If we didn't, this is probably the first time the page is loading or the user's opened it in a new tab or a new window. So we'll head off to the server and do that thing. In either case, we have our categories. If there was no categories, then we have a message. Else, this is not really relevant to this one today. And again, like I said, this is already 20 minutes. I don't want to overblow this too much. So I just go through the whole thing and I build up all the UI and I add it to the custom element. And then I attach some event listeners. And when you click on a button, it basically then again uses the API over here to get a specific question. And then it also has the answer, builds a little UI, very simple at this point. And you can look at the question and try and answer it. Then you can click show answer and it shows the answer. But that's it. That's how simple this is. But you can already see how you can use that to make something like this really nice. We have a little banner that can be dismissed, and now we don't show it again, so the user isn't bothered by the same banner showing up over and over again, or just because they open a new tab or a new window. They've dismissed it. They know there's new categories, so they can move right on. But also because we have our categories cached now, when we reload, it's super fast. And then we can try something. In the original script of the matrix, the machines used humans as additional computing power instead of batteries. True or false? Apparently that's true. So there you also learned something new. So I hope you found this interesting. Have a look at the accompanying newsletter. Subscribe if you want to get more like these. If you like this and you want more content like this around HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, and then web standards and the open web, then hit that subscribe button. If you like this, give it the old thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. I might be a little sad, but I also need to learn that you didn't like this content or whatever. Please let me know in the comments your thoughts as well. If you have any questions, let me know. Happy to answer them. And until the next one, support Open Web Docs. If you're able to, even just spread the word about the work they do, that also helps. And keep your side of the internet a little more open, a little more friendly, a little more welcoming and accessible. And I'll speak to you soon. Peace.